doesn't always scream danger. Sometimes it hides behind a smile, behind a painted face. The town tried to move forward, but they could never forget. They couldn't erase the memory of the lives lost, or the man who had been their worst nightmare. Martin Delroy's legacy lived on, not as a figure of notoriety, but as a chilling reminder of the fragility of trust and the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected places. And for those who had survived, for the victims' families, the most painful truth was that no amount of time could wash away what had been done. The scars remained, not just in the town's history, but in the hearts of those who had been left to pick up the pieces. In the small, fog-wrapped town of Lantern Hollow, Pennsylvania, life moved slowly. People knew their neighbors, and the streets emptied by dusk. It was the kind of town where change was rare and faces were familiar. That's why the arrival of a street performer in clown makeup caused such a stir. He called himself Jingles, a man with a painted grin and a bag full of juggling pins, balloon animals, and strange jokes that made people laugh or feel uneasy. Every weekend, Jingles would perform at the same street corner just outside a local bakery. He wore faded rainbow pants, squeaky shoes, and a red rubber nose that bobbed whenever he spoke. His act was bizarre, sometimes funny, sometimes offbeat, but always magnetic. Children begged their parents to stop and watch. Teenagers recorded his antics for social media. Adults would sometimes cross the street to avoid him, unsure if he was a joke or something darker hiding behind the paint. Nobody knew much about him. He said he came from upstate New York. He didn't share his real name, didn't have any known family or friends in town. He paid cash for everything, rented a rundown trailer in a quiet wooded area, and kept mostly to himself. At first, locals saw him as another eccentric character, maybe a little strange but ultimately harmless. Over time, they grew used to his presence, just another quirk in a sleepy town that rarely made the news. Then came the first disappearance. Rachel Evans, a 32-year-old graphic designer, lived alone in a cozy apartment 2 blocks from where Jingles performed. She was well-liked but private, someone who preferred books and online chats over crowded bars. She had recently joined a dating app according to her coworkers and mentioned meeting someone new. Then one day, she simply vanished. Her apartment door was locked. Her phone and wallet were inside. Her car was parked out front. But she was gone. Police found no signs of forced entry, no struggle, no clues. At the time, her case was treated like a possible runaway or mental health issue. But 3 months later, another woman disappeared. Lauren Hastings, 28, a bookstore employee with a nearly identical lifestyle. She also lived alone, also dated online, and also vanished without any trace. The town grew nervous. Rumors spread quickly, and some even whispered about the strange man in the clown suit. Still, there was no proof. Jingles remained on his street corner, juggling and laughing as though nothing had changed. And no one, especially not the police, could have imagined the horror that was about to unfold. After the second woman vanished, Lantern Hollow began to feel different. The quiet charm that once defined the town slowly gave way to a tension that people couldn't quite explain. Women walked faster at night, neighbors double-checked their locks, and whispers about the disappearances grew louder. But no one had any answers. The police followed leads that went nowhere, and while some suspected a connection, there wasn't enough evidence to link the missing women. Life went on, but the sense of safety had started to crumble. Far from the attention, Jingles was carefully building a second identity. Stripping away the makeup and ridiculous clothing, he became Lucas, a soft-spoken, clean-cut man who introduced himself online as a freelance artist from Pittsburgh. His photos, some edited, some staged, showed a handsome, thoughtful man who had suffered loss. He claimed to have lost his wife to cancer. He said he was just trying to start over. It was a lie, but a powerful one. It made women feel safe. It made them feel sorry for him. Using this persona, he started reaching out to women on dating apps. He searched for those who lived alone, who mentioned hobbies like reading, painting, or working from home. Women without children. Women whose social media showed no close family nearby. He looked for isolation, He found vulnerability. He waited patiently for responses and was always careful in how he spoke. He didn't rush things. He let the women feel in control. When they finally met him in person, they didn't see a clown. They saw the man from the photos, gentle, reserved, and kind. His first few meetings went well. He learned how to avoid suspicion. He picked up on what worked and what didn't. Every meeting was planned to happen at the woman's home. He made sure it was a private setting. Always at night. Always after he had built enough trust. That was when the killings began. There was no screaming, no broken furniture, no blood. He had practiced, prepared, and perfected his method. Each time, he took only one or two items, a necklace, a pair of earrings, sometimes a small photograph. He cleaned the scene carefully and disappeared without a trace. His real name never came up. His burner phone was discarded after each meeting. He made sure no cameras were nearby. Meanwhile, the town remained in the dark. As more women vanished across the region, the cases remained unconnected. Police departments didn't share data, and no one suspected that the smiling clown from Lantern Hollow was behind the mask of a calculated predator. The quiet killer had found his system, and with each successful encounter, he grew bolder, believing he was unstoppable. With 5 women missing across 3 towns, whispers turned into quiet panic, but the puzzle remained unsolved. The police were looking in too many directions at once. Without any bodies, without any witnesses, they struggled to prove that crimes had even occurred. In many of the cases, the victims had simply vanished from their homes. No forced entry, no sign of struggle, nothing stolen. It was as if they had simply decided to walk away from their lives. But deep down, investigators knew that wasn't true. Jingles, still performing on the weekends, blended back into the background. The clown persona had become his perfect disguise. A public face no one would connect to the quiet man women met online. He knew how to act harmless, how to vanish between identities. Each time he targeted someone, he watched them for days. He took notes on their routines, learned how long packages sat outside their doors, how often lights turned on at night, and whether they had visitors. His methods were cold, patient, and terrifyingly effective. Then came Melanie Torres. Melanie was 34, a software developer who had just moved into a small apartment on the edge of town. She had a quiet life and was trying online dating after a long break. Her profile matched everything Jingles looked for. He contacted her using a new alias and began the familiar process. Long conversations, emotional stories, the same tragic past. Melanie responded with warmth and curiosity. He arranged to meet her after 3 weeks of daily chats, but Melanie had something none of the other women had: a hidden security camera. Months before meeting Jingles, her apartment had been broken into. Though nothing was stolen, it left her shaken. Her brother, a former security technician, helped her install a small motion-activated camera disguised as a smoke detector. She almost forgot it was there. Melanie disappeared 6 days after their first meeting. At first, her brother assumed she had gone away for the weekend, but when she missed work without calling, he grew worried. Using his spare key, he entered her apartment and discovered everything intact, except she was gone. When he reviewed the camera footage, what he found changed everything. The video showed a man arriving late at night. He was calm, wore dark clothing and gloves. His face was partially visible. He moved with precision, cleaning surfaces as he left. But what stood out most was a small object on his bag, a keychain with a red clown nose dangling from the zipper. The footage didn't give a name, but it gave a face. And for the first time, the police had a real lead, a shadowy figure who wasn't supposed to exist. The hunter had finally left a trail. The footage from Melanie Torres's apartment changed everything. For the first time, investigators had a partial face, a time of entry, and a single strange clue: the clown nose keychain. It was enough to breathe life into a stalled investigation. Local authorities released the image to nearby precincts and requested help from the public. Within days, a bakery employee in Lantern Hollow came forward. She recognized the keychain. She said the clown performer, Jingles, Always had one just like it hanging from his backpack. That tip shifted the focus sharply. Police quickly discovered the performer's real name, Martin Delroy. He had no arrest record, but a deeper dive into his background revealed a long trail of inconsistencies, fake addresses, different aliases, and multiple phone numbers linked to online dating profiles. When officers went to search the trailer, he rented on the outskirts of town. They found it abandoned. Clothes were gone, drawers emptied, and the place wiped down carefully. He had vanished again, just like his victims. A multi-state alert was issued, and detectives began tracking his online activity. It was a challenge. Martin used prepaid phones, fake names, and encrypted messaging apps. But he wasn't as invisible as he believed. A tech analyst uncovered a dating profile that matched the pattern. A man named Alex, reaching out to women fitting the same type, single, isolated, and living alone. The profile traced back to a new location, Cincinnati, Ohio. There, a woman named Andrea Kelly had recently reported an encounter that felt off. She had matched with Alex and met him once at a local coffee shop. He seemed kind but asked too many personal questions about her schedule, her apartment, and whether she lived alone. She didn't think much of it until a few days later, when she noticed her door lock was damaged. She filed a report but had no proof of who had done it. After hearing about the Pennsylvania investigation, she submitted her security camera footage. What it showed made her blood run cold. The same man who had taken her for coffee was now caught on camera outside her apartment late at night, holding tools and wearing gloves. He looked up, saw the camera, and walked away, but not before his face was clearly captured. This time, the footage was enough. Police released the image, and within 24 hours, Martin Delroy was identified and located at a cheap motel near the state border. He didn't resist arrest. In the room, investigators found wigs, makeup, jewelry, and a chilling notebook filled with names, dates, and disturbing descriptions. His killing spree had ended, not because he stopped, but because he finally made a mistake he couldn't erase. The arrest of Martin Delroy sent shockwaves through Lantern Hollow and beyond. For years he had moved unnoticed, living under layers of deception. Now, with his true identity exposed, investigators and journalists scrambled to piece together how a street performer in clown makeup had become a serial killer, hiding in plain sight. His trial became national news, and the public couldn't get enough of the chilling contrast, bright colors and painted smiles masking cold, methodical murder. Inside the courtroom, the evidence against Martin was overwhelming. The notebook, found in his motel room, listed personal details about at least 10 women, some confirmed victims, others still unaccounted for. The items recovered with him, rings, necklaces, scraps of handwritten notes, matched belongings reported missing by the families of several women. DNA analysis linked him to 3 crime scenes. There were also digital trails from his online dating accounts, revealing a pattern of manipulation and control. He never confessed, but his silence only made the case more haunting. Experts testified that Martin showed signs of narcissistic personality disorder and deep-rooted antisocial tendencies. But he wasn't insane. He knew what he was doing. He planned each step. He watched and waited. The clown persona wasn't just a disguise, it was a mask that gave him permission to live without consequence. He once wrote in his notebook, "No one sees the sad under the smile. They only laugh." The jury took just a few hours to deliver their verdict, guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Into Ifos, the courtroom, families of the victims wept. Some said the sentence brought them closure. Others admitted it would never be enough. No sentence could return the lives he had taken or erase the fear that lingered in every corner he had touched. Lantern Hollow, once known for its calm streets and small-town warmth, changed forever. The corner where Jingles used to perform remained empty, and the bakery he stood in front of put up a small sign that read, "In memory of the ones we lost. May we never forget to look beyond the mask." Melanie Torres's brother, the one who uncovered the first major clue, started a non-profit in her name. Its mission, to educate women about online safety, raise awareness about behavioral red flags, and help victims of digital stalking. Andrea Kelly, whose caution in camera saved her life, published a book recounting her near escape and the lessons she learned. It became a bestseller. Martin Delroy never spoke again after his conviction. No interviews, no letters, no remorse. He simply faded into the prison system, no longer a performer, no longer invisible. But his story remained, a chilling reminder that evil often hides in plain sight behind painted smiles and friendly words. In the months following Martin Delroy's conviction, the true scale of his crimes continued to unfold. As investigators sifted through his notebooks, devices, and hidden storage boxes, they discovered more than just souvenirs. They found maps with circles drawn around apartment buildings in different cities, screenshots of dating profiles, and notes written in code. It became clear that his reign of terror had been even wider than initially believed. Several cold cases involving missing women from neighboring states were reopened. Though conclusive links couldn't be made in every instance, patterns echoed his methods, leaving families to wonder if their loved ones had fallen victim to the man once known as Jingles. The public's fascination with the case didn't fade quickly. Documentaries, podcasts, and books emerged, each offering a different angle. Some focused on the psychology of his double life, while others criticized how law enforcement failed to connect the disappearances sooner. One investigative series titled Painted Evil revealed that Martin had previously attempted to apply for positions as a caregiver and art teacher, but had been quietly denied due to vague background inconsistencies. These moments, once overlooked, were now haunting in hindsight. In Lantern Hollow, fear slowly gave way to reflection. The town held a candlelight vigil for the victims in front of the old bakery where Martin used to perform. Photos of the missing women were placed along the sidewalk, their stories finally recognized in full. Residents who had once stopped to laugh at Jingles now spoke in hushed voices, trying to reconcile the cheerful figure they remembered with the monster he truly was. Parents grew more cautious. Online dating became a topic of serious discussion at town meetings and schools. For the survivors and families of victims, the aftermath was not something that could be wrapped up in news headlines. Healing was slow. Some found strength in community, others turned inward. Melanie's brother expanded his foundation across state lines, working with local law enforcement to improve digital safety protocols. Andrea Kelly began speaking at college campuses, urging young women to trust their instincts and protect their digital privacy. Despite all that was uncovered, one question continued to haunt everyone involved. How many more were there? How many names had never been written in that notebook? How many faces had disappeared without leaving a single clue? Martin Delroy never gave answers. In prison, he refused all visitors and correspondence. Some believed he stayed silent out of guilt. Others thought it was his final act of control, to keep the truth to himself. But his silence didn't stop the world from remembering. His legacy wasn't the painted smile he wore on street corners. It was the lives he destroyed and the warning he left behind. Never assume a harmless face can't hide a deadly secret. Years passed, but the shadow cast by Martin Delroy never truly left. His crimes had shaken not only Lantern Hollow but small communities across the country. He became a cautionary tale, the name whispered during conversations about safety, trust, and how well we ever truly know someone. Despite his silence behind prison walls, the impact of his actions echoed far beyond the courtroom. His legacy was not just the horror he inflicted, but the systemic flaws he exposed. Gaps in communication between jurisdictions, the ease of creating fake online identities, and the vulnerabilities in digital dating. More victims began to be unofficially connected to Martin. Investigators quietly linked him to disappearances as far west as Illinois and as far south as Virginia. Though many of the cases lacked the forensic proof needed to reopen investigations, the patterns were eerily similar. Single women, isolated lifestyles, online dating histories, and sudden vanishings without a trace. These lingering questions kept the case alive in online forums and among true crime communities who believed the real count of his victims could be more than double what had been confirmed. In the wake of it all, meaningful change began to take root. Law enforcement agencies in several states adopted new collaborative systems for missing persons reports, enabling faster pattern recognition across counties. The dating apps Martin had exploited came under pressure to strengthen identity verification protocols, and many introduced safety features like background checks and video verification. Though no system could ever be perfect, these changes marked a shift. People were no longer willing to ignore the risks that had once been brushed aside. Meanwhile, those closest to the victims continued to fight for remembrance. Melanie Torres's foundation evolved into a national support network, offering resources to women leaving abusive relationships or dealing with stalking. Memorial scholarships were launched in the names of victims. Documentaries were produced with the family's cooperation, not for profit, but to honor the women whose lives were lost in silence. The old corner where Martin had once juggled and joked was never occupied again. No performers. No music. The town chose not to erase its history but to mark it quietly. A small plaque was placed there that read, "In memory of those taken too soon. Let their stories remind us to always look beyond the mask." Martin Delroy remained in prison, aging slowly, untouched by public attention. His story may have started with laughter, but it ended with silence. And for the people he left behind, survivors, families, and a changed town, that silence became the loudest part of all. As the years wore on, the case of Martin Delroy continued to leave a mark on everyone who had been touched by it. His name became synonymous with the eerie notion that even the most unassuming figures could harbor the darkest of secrets. For some, the fear of a predator hiding behind a mask of innocence never truly went away. It became a quiet anxiety, lingering in the back of people's minds when they crossed paths with someone they didn't know, when they met a new person online or encountered a stranger on the street. People were more cautious now, more aware. But for the families of the victims, the awareness came with a heavy cost. The families had moved on, in their own ways, but the pain never fully subsided. Melanie Torres's parents continued to run the foundation in their daughter's name, reaching out to women who had been left in the wake of online predators. It was their way of making sure no one else would go through what their daughter had, but they knew it could never fill the hole she had left behind. Every year they held a memorial walk, where they invited families of other victims to come together, share their stories, and remember the women lost in silence. It wasn't just about the past, it was about creating a future where something like this could never happen again. Andrea Kelly, the woman whose security camera footage had led to Delroy's capture, found herself in the public eye. Her decision to write a book detailing her escape and the aftermath of surviving such a close call had earned her a following. She became a voice for others who had narrowly avoided victimization. She toured the country, speaking at conferences, universities, and media outlets about the importance of digital safety, personal boundaries, and how easily the wrong person could slip into someone's life unnoticed. Though she had lived through the terror, there were times when she still caught herself double-checking locks and watching unfamiliar faces too closely. The paranoia didn't always leave, no matter how much time passed. As for Lantern Hollow, life slowly returned to some semblance of normalcy. The town, once so shaken by the events, began to rebuild itself in quiet ways. The old bakery where Martin had once performed became a coffee shop, a place for people to gather without fear. The town square was cleaned up, with benches added, and flowers planted to commemorate the victims. It was an effort to move on, but it was impossible for the people to forget. In prison, Martin Delroy lived a quiet existence. He never sought publicity, never attempted to reach out to the media. Some speculated that his silence was a form of control, that he enjoyed knowing he had taken the last word from everyone. But in the end, the silence was all he had left. The town, the survivors, and the families of the victims had found a new kind of peace. One that could not be taken away. They had survived him, and in the end, that was the only victory that mattered. Years after the conviction of Martin Delroy, the ripples of his crimes continued to reverberate across the lives of those affected. Lantern Hollow, once a sleepy town where everyone knew everyone else, had been irrevocably changed. The quiet streets, the parks where children once played freely, and the local businesses now felt different. A cloud of unease had settled over the town, one that would never fully dissipate. For the victims' families, time had not brought the healing they had hoped for. They continued to live with a heavy sadness, one that didn't fade with the changing seasons or the passing of years. Melanie Torres's mother, now an advocate for victims' rights, found herself in constant battle with her own grief. She threw herself into her work, but the quiet moments, those soft, empty spaces between tasks, were when the absence of her daughter felt the heaviest. Her house still held the scent of Melanie's favorite lavender candles, her daughter's belongings neatly tucked away, untouched. But no matter how much she tried to move forward, the silence left behind by Melanie's disappearance remained deafening. Andrea Kelly, too, struggled with a sense of survivor's guilt. Her life, though seemingly normal, was forever marked by that chance encounter with Martin. She had gone on with her life, becoming a strong voice for others, but in her quieter moments, she often found herself haunted by questions that didn't have answers. What if she hadn't installed that security camera? What if she hadn't trusted her instincts? Would she have been another victim? Would she too have disappeared without a trace? The families, while strong and resilient, often met with one another, sharing their pain and helping each other through the toughest times. The annual memorial event organized by Melanie's foundation became more than just a tribute to the victims. It became a lifeline for those who had lost something irreplaceable. It wasn't just about remembering the women who had been stolen from them. It was about finding solidarity, a way to keep their spirits alive in a world that had, for a time, forgotten them. As Lantern Hollow tried to move forward, the lessons learned from the tragedy remained at the forefront of community life. Public discussions about safety, both physical and online, became commonplace. People were no longer passive participants in their own security. The town had adopted a zero-tolerance policy toward predators, and local schools had incorporated programs designed to educate children and teenagers about digital safety. People spoke openly about the dangers of online dating, warning others not to trust strangers, not to ignore the signs, and to always be cautious, no matter how charming or disarming someone seemed to be. In the end, Martin Delroy's name was never forgotten, but not for the reasons he may have wished. His face remained etched in the public's mind, not as the clown he once performed as, but as a symbol of the dangers lurking in the most unsuspecting places. The darkness he had unleashed had left its mark, but the strength of the survivors, the resilience of the families, and the unity of the community stood as a testament to the enduring power of hope, even in the face of such profound loss. Years after the trial, Martin Delroy's name had become almost synonymous with horror, but it had also morphed into a symbol of unresolved darkness. Lantern Hollow, once a town of calm simplicity, had learned to live with its new identity. The tragedy had shifted everything. What was once a town known for its quiet streets and close-knit community now carried a hidden weight that was often talked about in whispers. Even after his conviction and life sentence, the damage had been done, and it wasn't just the families of the victims who suffered. The entire town had been forever marked by the terror Martin Delroy had unleashed. For Melanie's parents, the grief was something they could never outrun. Despite the years of advocacy, fundraising, and community outreach, the hole left by their daughter's absence never healed. The foundation they ran continued to help countless women, but no amount of work or charity could fill the emptiness. Melanie's mother often found herself sitting in her daughter's old room late at night, surrounded by items that still smelled of her perfume, still held traces of her laughter. She would reach out for her phone, ready to send a text, but she remembered too late. Melanie would never text back again. Every day was a reminder of her loss, but she channeled that grief into a force for good, pouring her heart into keeping other women safe. Andrea Kelly, the woman whose quick thinking had saved her life, never found herself at peace either. Despite the accolades, the media attention, and the book deals that followed her survival story, she remained haunted by what could have been. She had moved to a new town, far from the shadows of Lantern Hollow, but even in the safety of her new life, she couldn't shake the sense of unease. Every time she heard a door creak at night, or saw an unfamiliar face in a crowd, a wave of panic would wash over her. She tried to keep it hidden, not wanting to be defined by the trauma, but deep down, She knew the terror would always be there, lurking just below the surface. Despite the collective pain, Lantern Hollow began to slowly rebuild. The memorial walks, the scholarship funds, and the safety programs had created a stronger, more vigilant community. Yet there were moments when the town's scars bled through. People who had once been carefree now locked their doors more often, questioned every unfamiliar face, and stared too long at strangers in the street. They had learned, the hard way, that evil doesn't always wear the mask you expect. It doesn't always scream danger. Sometimes it hides behind a smile, behind a painted face. The town tried to move forward, but they could never forget. They couldn't erase the memory of the lives lost, or the man who had been their worst nightmare. Martin Delroy's legacy lived on, not as a figure of notoriety, but as a chilling reminder of the fragility of trust and the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected places. And for those who had survived, for the victims' families, the most painful truth was that no amount of time could wash away what had been done. The scars remained, not just in the town's history, but in the hearts of those who had been left to pick up the pieces.